Good morning, judges. My name is Alex, and I'm here with my colleagues Claire, Rachel, and Zach from the University of Alberta, and we're here to discuss Finvolution. Now, fintech companies like Finvolution have proven that digital banking and fintech can grow not only the banking sector substantially, but the economy too. We see this in China, how they've been able to become one of the biggest economies in the world by fully embracing this technology. However, banking also is extremely inaccessible to a lot of people outside of China. And the rapidly changing technology that now accompanies banking makes it even less accessible to the public. Luckily, that's where Finvolution comes in, because their key strength is the ability to find the pocket between the consumers and the banks and connect them how they need to best through their key services. In China, you've already established two key services. The first being Magic Mirror, which essentially is an alternative to a credit score. Certain people who lack the borrowing history or the information required to take out loans can now use this alternative to make the banks more accessible and be able to borrow from the banks. You also have the Magpie Bridge system, which is essentially a way to pair the consumer, the bank user, and the banks with the most ideal borrowing and lending partnership by making profiles of the consumers and the banks, understanding both of their financial goals and matching them accordingly. When looking to expand into Indonesia, it's important not only to understand how your key services work, but what role they fulfill in connecting your consumers with your banks, and how the market might change and how your services might need to change with it.
Our presentation today will address the key problem of how can Finvolution leverage their strengths to expand into Indonesia. We will address three alternatives. Firstly, maintaining the current business model, adjusting Magic Mirror, and adjusting Magpie Bridge. We'll move into our recommendation of spreading the Magpie's wings and increasing the customers utilizing an adjustment to Magpie Bridge. We will assess our impact using a KPI of 2.5% adoption among mobile payment users and overall successful expansion into Indonesia. I'd now like to welcome Rachel to speak on our assumptions.
Thanks so much, Zach. So first and foremost, it's going to be crucial to look at Indonesia and the market size of Indonesia and the potential profitability that could come from this expansion. In the analysis that I have conducted today, I wanted to point out some key assumptions, the main one being on the bottom. There's a thing called the tech adoption cycle, where it goes through about 5 stages. In the first stage, it's with the very early adopters at 2.5% getting on board. Then we move on to 13.5%, then 34%, and those are kind of the majority. Then you have kind of the late adopters at another 34% and 16%, which are laggards. I would like to draw your attention to this because it will be used in the analysis in terms of the adoption rate to be able to properly size the market that we could capture in Indonesia for Finvolution. So another point that I would like to bring up is the very last line. It says % that use mobile payments. And so right now, I would just like to say that we will be using the analysis that we will be able to capture the mobile payment users that are already familiar with mobile payments. So in order to do so, this slide looks a little confusing, but what I'd like to draw your attention to is the very first line, that is the current users of Finvolution at 108 million users. Next, after conducting a comparison between Indonesia and China based on their phone rates, their bank rates, as well as their population size, I've been able to do a rough analysis of how many users would be able to adopt per year using that cycle, and then compare that to the 108 million in China to be able to get a % of China's users, which I have prorated the analysis with. So we had the information for China's profitability from their revenue as well as their costs to get their net profit. However, I had to prorate this with the population that I had just conducted, and that stands on the second and third line. So the users themselves are a smaller amount based on the smaller population of Indonesia, as well as the lower amount that use the bank accounts. What I would really like to draw your attention to is in orange, it says per person. I took revenue per person and I times that by the amount of users that you could expect to capture, leading to an awesome amount of $305 million in Chinese yen. This is fantastic. It means that it is a profitable area to head into.
Now, when looking into expanding into Indonesia, it's important to understand what this new market looks like, and more importantly, how it compares to China, where Finvolution has already found so much success. The first key point that we've acknowledged is that Indonesia is a tech-savvy country, but not yet to the extent of China. China has fully embraced implementing technology fully into their banking. However, Indonesia isn't quite there yet. Something to note is that the government is open to it by maintaining limited regulation on the industry. And Finvolution's recent licensing through their subsidiary is an indication that this is where the banking sector is moving into. However, there is a smaller banking infrastructure in general in Indonesia than there is in China. When looking at the percent of population with bank accounts, in Indonesia, it's 49% versus China's 80%. That means Indonesia has just over half of what China has right now, and their smaller population shows that it is a significantly smaller market. However, looking at those markets, they're behaving differently. In Indonesia, there is a higher proportion of credit borrowers than China. When we look at the percent of bank users within those countries, Indonesia has a 37% users with credit cards who have bank accounts versus China's 29%. So in China, where you focused on Magic Mirror to get people's credit scores, in Indonesia, that necessarily isn't the same issue. What we've identified as a key issue in the Indonesian market is connecting users to banks in the first place, not necessarily lenders to borrowers. And now we'll have Claire walk us through our alternatives with that in mind.
So we have identified a few different alternatives that we just want to walk you through when deciding how to best leverage Finvolution's strengths when expanding into new markets. The first option is looking at leaving the business model as is. Why would you do this? It's because your model has a proven track record, and using the current model, you have been able to attain high levels of success in the Chinese market. Why would this not work, however? Even though the model is really great, it caters more to the needs of the Chinese market, and different considerations need to be taken into account when entering the Indonesian market. This is to ensure that you can effectively reach the target market. As well, there is a different fundamental challenge in the smaller banking structure in Indonesia, and this model will not effectively meet those challenges. So the next alternative is looking at adjusting the Magic Mirror service. Why would you do this? It's because this service would ultimately help Indonesians who lack that credit history and income supporting documents. Why not, however? Even though this service does help support individuals without credit, it is only applicable to people who already have bank accounts. So this service would fail to address the limited banking usage within Indonesia, as the portion of the population with bank accounts is much smaller than the portion without bank accounts. And lastly, our final alternative is looking at making adjustments to the Magpie Bridge service. Why would you do this? It is because this service already has a structure in place that helps connect consumers to banks that will best meet their needs. So expanding on the infrastructure already being used can help introduce a new aspect of this service that'll help satisfy market conditions in Indonesia. Why not, however? You will need to dedicate time and resources to help further develop this service. However, the growth that can be attained would be well worth the resources put into the developmental costs. So this is also an adjustment that could be used in further expansion efforts.
And that brings us to our recommendation today, which we have titled Spreading the Magpie's Wings. Currently, the way Finvolution services work is users are required to register with both a bank account and a phone number. And at that point, they can use the Magpie Bridge system with AI and data to pair the users with particular financial goals with the banks that match those financial goals so that they can find a very beneficial borrowing-lending relationship. However, in Indonesia, that is one step ahead of where the market needs are at. 51% of Indonesians do not currently have a bank account. And the Magpie Bridge system has an architecture with both data and AI to connect users with banks to match their financial needs. So by removing the barriers of entry, by removing the requirement of the bank account for Indonesian users, we can sign on additional Indonesian users who don't yet have bank accounts and use the Magpie Bridge system to match them with a bank account, with a debit card that they can then use in future banking needs. And we'll get more into that by analyzing our 3 phases of our implementation. So looking at the 3 phases, our first one is to expand the Magpie Bridge. This is, again, removing the barriers of entry and using the architecture to develop a new service to connect Indonesians with banks, and all the app updates that come with that. Secondly, we're going to look at how to enter the Indonesian market by starting with those business-to-business relationships, by partnering with banks, and then eventually moving into the consumer market. And finally, further expansion into the Southeast Asian market, which has been outlined as a key goal for Finvolution moving forward. And we will analyze when you will be ready and what countries to consider and what characteristics to consider.
So to jump right into it, the first stage of the implementation is focusing on expanding the Magpie Bridge service. What this is exactly is building off of the current infrastructure you have in place that connects consumers with accounts with new banks that best satisfy their needs. And you will build off of this, but we'll be adding in a new component that's focus is on connecting consumers without bank accounts first with banks. So why you are doing this is because currently there are more people without bank accounts in Indonesia, and you need to expand the user base in this market for your services to be effectively utilized. As well, adjusting the service to first target individuals without banking and getting them signed up for a debit card will ultimately create a bigger market and will get more users ready to use all of Finvolution services. Additionally, this service will provide the opportunity to supply more underserved individuals with financial services. So this will help take the company one step closer to achieving financial inclusion. So now to take a look at how you will be doing this. You'll need to remove the current requirement in place that is requiring users to sign up with a bank account and instead replace it with the requirement of needing just a phone number. You'll need to work with your current developer team to help implement these changes to the app interface. And after these changes have been made, users will now sign up through the app with their phone number, and then they will be asked if they have a bank account. If they select no, they will be directed to the new service that will then work to connect them with a bank to sign them up for a debit card. If new users already have a bank account, they will be directed to the current platform where they can then proceed with regular usage of the services. So the impact of adjusting this Magpie Bridge service will ultimately help grow the Indonesian banking sector by making it easier for consumers to connect with banks. As well, we did set a KPI for this stage, and that is seeing that 10% of new users in Indonesia are consumers signing up for bank accounts. And now I'll pass it back to Alex to get into the next stage.
So when looking at entering the Indonesian market, we believe it is critical to hire an Indonesian team for outreach and contracts. Currently, we have dedicated 4 employees to be physically based within Indonesia to be able to communicate with banks and consumers and physically be within the market so that they can react to whatever is happening. A lot of the administrative work with the app and all the other work will be happening out of China still. But as market share continues to grow and Finvolution continues to grow within the Indonesian market, we foresee this team growing as demand grows. Now, in terms of strategy, we recommend beginning with those business-to-business relationships with the Indonesian banks. This is the expectation that the Indonesian team will reach out to these banks and create these partnerships so that they can join the platform before it goes out to the public, so that the service seems complete and not half-baked and have Indonesians who aren't sure about banking to not be sure about the platform. It's critical for the banks to understand the key value proposition when you are proposing them joining this platform. And that is that Finvolution is offering a more accessible banking service that can grow the banking sector substantially by targeting a majority of Indonesians who do not find banking accessible and have not dipped their toes into that sector. Once you complete those contracts, it'll be time to launch the service to the consumer market. And what is critical is taking advantage of the marketing channels that will be able to target your target demographic, that is those 51% of Indonesians who don't have bank accounts, as well as those who are looking for a smarter way of banking. Now, for those who have many mobile devices, they will have access to the internet and certain social media channels that FinVolution uses, such as WeChat and TikTok, who are not only popular in China, but around Asia as well. For those who might not have those social media channels, but are interested in banking, a good way to target those would be through the search engine marketing, specifically Baidu and Sogu. For people who are searching about banking, for FinVolution to pop up and them to explore what those values are. And the value proposition here is what the value proposition has always been, specifically more accessible banking, explaining to Indonesians what the benefits of banking are and how FinVolution can bring them closer to their financial goals. And then eventually through their other services, highlight more accessible borrowing and more accessible money management, as well as their anti-fraud system that they have. It is critical for FinVolution to target both businesses and consumers and find that pocket to show that it is a mutually beneficial service for both the banks and the consumers, because that's where FinVolution thrives.
Perfect. So banks are happy and consumers are happy, but let's make sure that FinVolution is happy too. We've taken a look at our implementation costs, and we have decided to put away a sum of money to have a subsidiary. This worked well in China to allow you to have kind of a home base, if you will, for your large technology company to be able to interact with consumers. So we have allotted about 50 million yen for that. We also, as Alex said, have 4 people on the strategy team with salaries, as well as we've had an additional team of 5%. And this was just given the fact that growth is going to happen in Indonesia, and we want to be right there with them too, so that you can thrive well in Indonesia as well. And just in case any of those robotics AI need to be updated to ensure that training goes seamlessly, we have allotted a cost there as well. So this totals for about 68 million yen, which is less than 20% of the entire profit that you will receive. And with this budget being very high, just in case, and the projections being very conservative, this leads to a very favorable outcome for all 3 of you to be happy.
Entering the final stage of implementation, FinVolution sets its sights to recreate the success it will see in Indonesia. It will analyze the different Southeast Asian countries who will be the most optimal to enter at the time. This, however, will not be introduced until 2 KPIs of 2.5% mobile payment users in Indonesia, as well as 10% new users have been achieved. Once that's been achieved, utilizing the metrics of percent mobile phone users, as well as the percent of ownership of bank cards in countries, we will evaluate our high-value countries. The current high-value countries are Vietnam, India, and the Philippines for these reasons. After a country has been chosen through the analysis, it will then begin the process of obtaining licenses and establishing subsidiaries. As we know with Indonesia, this is a long process which will take multiple years, so it is important to start now and set the seeds for success for the next expansion. Next slide, please. So analyzing the timeline, we can see our 3 sections. The first green arrow indicates the changes to Magpie Bridge, the first stage. This will be hiring the Indonesian team and app development, which will total in at 2 months. We can also begin entering Indonesia at the same time. This is represented by the second arrow. This will take 6 months and will involve forming B2B relationships with domestic Indonesian banks and negotiating contracts with them. The third arrow indicates the new market analysis and expansion into a new country. This will not occur until 3 years and the KPIs have been met. There are 2 potential risks that emerge when evaluating this recommendation. The first being domestic Indonesian banks being unwilling to sign contracts. Our mitigation is quite easy, as we would bring in the Chinese banks who we have already established working relationships with and utilize them until we can bring on Indonesian banks. The second potential risk is Indonesian customer data not being easily accessible as it is in China. The mitigation for this would be to incorporate third-party data collection, such as Facebook and Amazon Web Services, to provide supplemental data that we can use. However, this would come at a small additional cost.
In conclusion, Indonesia's market has very different needs from China's. And by taking Magpie's architecture, you can make fintech banking not only a novelty, but a norm within Indonesia. Thank you, and we'll open the floor to some questions.
Thank you for your presentation. It's now time for the Q&A session. let's hear the first question. Thank you.
Thanks, team. Just elaborating a bit more on using the phone number instead of the bank account to get new customers. How are we tackling the know your customers issues? So can it be a temporary phone number? Are we looking at residential phone numbers?
Right. So part of the sign-up process for Finvolution already includes the phone number. So it's the phone number paired with the bank account. So by just requiring the phone number, we kind of decrease the barriers to entry and then present them with options to create a bank account and create a more permanent element to base the account off of. If nothing comes of it ultimately, it can be categorized into somewhere else, but it's just a stepping stone to help Indonesians enter the service easier.
And also, just to add on to that, the mitigation itself is once the phone number is entered, then they will be sent to the bank and they will then have to go through that process of getting the debit card and the bank account, which brings us back to the exact same infrastructure that we currently have in the Chinese market. So it's just allowing those connections. We would still have the same data and mitigation in place so that we could know our customer.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to know a little bit more about the partnership that you talked about with Indonesian bank, and you also mentioned that if you can't get any Indonesian-based bank, then you will start looking at Chinese banks first because you already have a relationship with them. So I just want to understand a bit more in terms of the partnership. What are you looking for from the partnership with the Indonesian banks? What
Absolutely.
is the value proposition for them and for yourself?
100%. So our value proposition would be the same as what we would be doing with Indonesian banks. We would be reaching out to them to connect to our customers, and that would be the value we would see with them. The Chinese banks would serve to be utilized in the same way as Indonesian banks without difference for us. The value proposition for the Chinese banks would be the ability to interact with new customers that were formerly non-incorporated with companies that work with the bank. So introducing them and bringing them into the interface will be of value for these Chinese banks.
But wouldn't the Chinese bank customer base be very small for you in the Indonesian market, you think?
It would be smaller than China's. However, it would provide a supplemental market, which would serve to simply add as rather compare.
Right. As a follow-on question, right? So I'm thinking when you enter into this market and you do, lending using technology data, you're saying that you will try to get information, but if you can't, then you go to Facebook and AWS. How trustworthy are those information? What kind of information can you get from them for you to be able to work your credit engine?
There would be certain internationally recognized and standardized information sharing. I understand that Facebook and Amazon Web Services both have consensual contracts signed with the people that they take the data from. So we would be able to confirm that this is an approved and utilized service around the world that we would also be utilizing.
And in addition, for that data collection as well, Amazon and Facebook are a great place to go in terms of one of the data points that Finvolution currently tracks is trustworthiness. So taking a look at friendships and connections could be one way that Facebook helps. In terms of Amazon, they could take a look at purchase history to ensure that it looks favorable and not like a risky lender, seeing perhaps some questionable transactions being done. However, there's also, of course, data from Indonesian government sites that you could pull from for things like housing starts, etc. So lots of data points, just Amazon and Facebook being supplementary.
Would it be easy for them to release data to you think?
For Amazon and Facebook, perhaps?
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a fantastic question, and it would probably be very great to consult with legal advice. To my knowledge of the way that they work in Canada, it is a very, very lengthy process, and you have to pass a lot of regulatory and legal hurdles in order to contact them. So it could be something that the 4 business strategists want to take a look into and ensure that we have the team and the relationships. However, given the fact that the relationship with the government in Indonesia is favorable, perhaps there is some relationships that you could leverage in order to have those partnerships go through.
It's also important to note that this isn't the primary recommendation for obtaining data that we have. It's more a mitigation if the more direct route does not work. So if those hurdles need to be jumped, then absolutely, I'm sure they could, but it is not the first pick either. It is just out of necessity if it comes to it.
Thank you.
So my question is, Maple Bridge is actually quite new in Indonesia. So how you're going to, what's your go-to-market strategy? How do you kind of like make this brand known to Indonesian market? Any thoughts?
My Wi-Fi cut out. My apologies. Could you please repeat the question?
Oh, okay. My question is, so I think your brand is expanding into Indonesia, but you're actually quite new, a new brand in Indonesia. What's your go-to-market strategy? How you're gonna make your brand known, and then you gain the trust from the Indonesian consumers?
So
yeah,
we did.
absolutely. Oh, sorry. I can jump in first, and I'll hand it off to you, Alex. So by eliminating that barrier of needing a bank account to sign up and instead replacing it with just needing a phone number, it is the hope that by just targeting through phone numbers, these target consumers will already have phones, they'll have access to the internet, and they'll be active on the internet. So making use of current marketing channels that are being utilized within the Chinese market, like TikTok, and bringing that and using that to help spread awareness and gain awareness around your brand in the Indonesian market. We are hoping to take what has worked in the Chinese market and bring it to the Indonesian market and build off of that success, because we have seen that these platforms are highly popular worldwide. So we think this would be a great starting point to help get the brand name out there additionally.
My another question would be, in your budgeting, you mentioned about the budgeting and subsidiary costs like 50 million. So what's the breakdown of that 50 million? It seems like a huge number. What's the planned use of that 50 million?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So with our friends at Yahoo Finance, my apologies for not putting the link on that. However, I went on to Yahoo Finance to take a look at the bank that FinVolution had bought 4.99% of their stock in. I took their current share price and their market cap and was able to back out the amount that they would need to pay for today to buy 4.99%, which was the 50 million that you see on screen. As I said, these numbers were very large. I wanted to make sure that this was a very conservative budget on the upside. It would more likely be closer to something like 20 million yen, depending on the cost of the banks in Indonesia. We all know that 2020 and 2021 have been quite an interesting year in the stock market. So I'm sure that there is some inflation in those prices that didn't exist when they bought in a few years ago. So you could expect that to be a much inflated price for sure for the shares. Just wanted to be conservative. So yes, Yahoo Finance is where that one came from.
Okay.
I've noticed that. Sorry, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, on the Indonesia piece, it says on your slide, 37% of the credit card are bank users. I'm trying to tie that to the exhibit 2, which is 18%. Was that a proportionate of something, just to clarify on that 37%?
Yes. So to clarify, that was taken the 18% of credit card users within Indonesia and dividing that by the 49%.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So it's the proportion of those bank users that also have a credit card.
Right. And is there a reason why you've used the financial statements in yen?
Yes, there is for the financial statements in yen. They were given in yen and then also in US dollars. And when I started to write them down on the slide, yen was the first one that
you mean the Chinese yuan? So not the, yeah. Okay, so it's the Chinese, oh, remember, okay, got it, the CYN, okay.
Yeah, no, my apologies.
Okay.
There.
I have a question about your expansion plan. I mean, you will first recommend to do Indonesia, which makes sense because you already got an international license. But then you say the next 3 countries would be Vietnam, India, and Philippines. Why and why that order? Or is that the order that you're suggesting?
So as the current metrics stand right now, Vietnam, India, and the Philippines in that order represent the countries right behind Indonesia that have a combination of high levels of mobile phone use with the population while also having low bank card ownership. So these represent in amount closest the next best options as it stands right now.
So this is when you say in that order and highest opportunity, you're talking about percentage of
yes.
Mobile phone population, not looking at the total population of the country, right?
Not the total population, the percent population that use phones, yes.
Okay, got you.
Okay, question for me with my digital background. So I see a lot of the alternatives you mentioned about will be the business model or just expanding, the maybe bridge, etc. So any thoughts on technology, any additional investment in technology or latest technology to support your expansion?
Absolutely. So I will take the first half. I saw Alex jumping to answer as well, so I'll take the number side and he can do a qualitative analysis. But absolutely, there will need to be some updates on the technology. We know that Finvolution is a very tech-centered company, so much so that their AI actually trains their humans, which is very, very fascinating. So with that expansion, we have allotted for an amount to go towards updating the tech. And I will now leave it to Alex to add his piece that he was going to originally add.
For sure. Well, I was just going to mention that what we are showing here is how to adjust the tech when entering a new market in terms of experience, in terms of services offered. This is an adjustment that needed to be made for Indonesia to capture the large population of unused or of users that do not have banks yet. When looking at future countries, that is also another opportunity to update the internal technology, as in the app and everything, by addressing other market needs that Philippines or India or Vietnam need. And of course, we have planned for the team to grow. So on an administrative side, on an upkeep side, in terms of service and stuff with more users, that does become more challenging. And so that is part of our technology, our staff upgrade budget as well, for more I guess, administrative technology sides. But in terms of experience, it'll be according to each market.
Okay.
And in terms of the magic mirror, which is the scoring system, do you think there will be any changes needed between China and Indonesia?
There may need to be slight adjustments once entering into Indonesia to understand how it might change. In China, there is a lot more robust credit score systems anyway. So currently, Magic Mirror is acting as a second filter almost to help boost certain users to get into the bank's radars. In Indonesia, if Finvolution is finding that there isn't enough credit score infrastructure, they may need to look into really making it a very robust and a very technical platform to make sure that if they are going to offer an alternative to credit score based on documentation and purchase histories and networks, that it is based on certain merits and that it is reliable. The fact that it is already trusted in China is a good base to have the Indonesian banks trust it. So for now, we do not suggest for it, but we do acknowledge that there may need to be changes to make it more robust if the Indonesian banking system is to rely on it more heavily than the Chinese one is.
Okay. And in that case, is the loan provision ratio in Indonesia higher than the one in China in your budgeted forecast?
So in the budgeted forecast, the way that it was approached was to take the per person revenues and cost that were in China. So I took all of their current financial statements and I just took it by user. So it's actually the exact same per user that we have allotted for as it was in China, just recognizing.
Time's up. Sorry, thank you all. The judges will now stay in the room for deliberation. Their team will place you to the waiting room and bring you back in for the feedback session in 8 minutes time. Thank you.